curiosity.
The Daleks Master Plan is arguably one of the most loved missing serials of all time. From graphic deaths and departures, to camp deliveries.
No, it can't be! It came from Uranus! I know it did!
This 12-part epic featuring the Doctor's greatest foes sticks out as one of the gems of missing serials. But the making of the serial has its own stories to tell, from producers leaving, last-minute rewrites, and even a walkout on set over endless arguments with William Hartnell. This is the story of the Daleks Master Plan. The Daleks have a weapon of mass destruction, capable of aging planets into dust. The only thing missing is the core of the Time Destructor itself.
The core of the Time Destructor, a full M of terranium, the rarest mineral in the universe.
Once it has been found, their master plan will be set in motion, and the conquest of the universe will be theirs.
Conquest!
This is the beginning of a 12-part serial where the Doctor loses many friends and solidifies the true evil of the Daleks. But how did this story come to be? The popularity of the Daleks in the early days of the show is hard to truly comprehend. From toys and dress-up costumes to film adaptations of the TV stories starring none other than Peter Cushing himself,
Stop the countdown!
their success was undeniable. Story editor Dennis Spooner wasn't oblivious to this and discussed the production of a fourth Dalek serial to be made for television, and it would be written by Dalek creator Terry Nation. The standalone episode, Mission to the Unknown, was to act as a sort of teaser to this upcoming serial, because 12 episodes clearly wasn't enough. Originally, this new serial, which would become the Daleks Master Plan, was planned as a 6-parter, but during a meeting of the Program Review Board, Hugh Weldon, the television program controller, suggested the story become a 13-part serial. This note was handed down to producer Verity Lambert, and they decided on a 12-part serial. This was because Terry Nation at the time was quite busy working on The Baron. To help lighten the workload, Dennis Spooner would co-write the serial with him. They had one initial meeting, but essentially wrote their episodes independently. It was a difficult time in Doctor Who's production history. Donald Tosh had recently taken over as script editor during the Time Meddler, and Verity Lambert had just left the show, and had passed on this overly ambitious story to the incoming producer, John Wiles. Wiles and Tosh were unhappy with the serial, to say the least, but since it was a request from the higher ups and was already in motion, there was nothing they could do to stop it. The master plan had to go on. Wiles considered quitting as producer, but Tosh eventually convinced him to stay on. When they agreed on the storyline, Nation and Spooner divided up the episodes and begun work. They found enjoyment in creating impossible cliffhangers, so the other writer had to figure out a solution for them. Spooner was slightly upset that Nation essentially ignored his cliffhanger for episode 6.
If either of you went outside, it would be extremely dangerous. The whole atmosphere is entirely poisonous.
This cliffhanger was quickly ignored in the next episode.
Yes, but you said the air out there was so bad that if we came out...
Never mind what I said, my dear boy. Do as you're told. Now open the doors. Remember to open them. Shut them after I've gone.
Terry Nation found himself far too busy to work on little old Doctor Who and ended up underwriting his scripts, sometimes even being around only 15 minutes worth of material. Donald Tosh found himself having to beef out the rest of the scripts in order to match runtime. This became a consistent problem throughout the serial. William Hartnell was struggling with the changes to the show. Now that Verity had left and his health issues were increasing, his relationship with the new producer was falling apart. It was decided to cut down his lines as much as they could in order to accommodate him. Douglas Camfield, a director who had done Planet of Giants and The Time Meddler by this point, was slated to direct the entire serial. Tristram Cary, who originally composed music for the Daleks and Marco Polo, returned to write the music for the Daleks Master Plan. In order to save recording time in studio, many film sequences were filmed beforehand, generally on 35mm film, and then slotted into the episode during editing. Pre-filming for the Daleks Master Plan began on Monday the 27th of September 1965 at Ealing Studios. Some of the effects filmed included smoke overlays, volcano eruptions, and flame torches.
Yes, we must get on with the repairs so the ship can get away from here.
Adrian Hill, who played new companion Katarina, recorded her death scene on this day. Interestingly enough, it was the first footage she ever shot for Doctor Who, since pre-filming for the Daleks Master Plan occurred before her first episode on The Mythmakers. The death scene was filmed by recording herself jumping on a trampoline against a star backdrop in slow motion. This was to give the grim effect of their lifeless bodies floating through space. Tuesday the 28th was focused on the fight between the Egyptian guards against Stephen and Sarah.
Remind me to teach you a few tricks sometime.
The trampoline from the previous recording day was reintroduced, where Peter Purvis and Jean Marsh recorded their trip through space to the planet Myra, bouncing in slow motion across the stars. This sequence was dubbed the Molecular Dissemination Scene. This sequence, alongside Katarina floating through space, impressed another production which was about to take place, the production office of Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. They contacted the BBC to ask how they achieved these effects, as they were quite impressed by them. Wednesday the 29th focused on the planet Myra with the invisible Visians. This included their invisible footprints in the dirt and the Visians being attacked by the Daleks' firepower. Thursday the 30th began with the TARDIS landing shots. This was delayed due to the TARDIS prop not being delivered on time.
Where the devil are you? Come on!
The death of Kurt Gantry, a space security agent who was killed by a Dalek, was also recorded on this day. These two shots thankfully survive in their original 35mm format. One segment of Sarah Kingdom's demise was filmed later this day also. Later on, Hartnell's sequences for the final episode were recorded alongside his transportation to Myra. On Friday, the 1st of October, the scene where the Daleks burned down the jungle was recorded. Originally, there was to be a shot of the TARDIS with flames around it, but they decided against recording it. Model shots for the planet Kemble's launch pad were recorded later that day also. A second week was required to handle the amount of pre-filming this serial needed. Starting on Monday the 4th, most of the day was spent on the Dalek fight against the Egyptian guards. Douglas was unhappy with the performance of the guards, so he cut down their shots. Further fight sequences were carried over to Tuesday the 5th. Wednesday the 6th focused on model shots for the Egyptian episodes. This included a sequence where the monk's TARDIS was turned into various oddities. An older actor, Mae Warden, stepped in to play the role of an aged Sarah Kingdom to complete Sarah's death scene. She returned the next day alongside William Hartnell to film the rest of the climax's sequences. They used a vision mixer to dissolve Mae's face into a skeleton and then dust. The final day of pre-filming was on Friday the 8th of October. This included a few shots for the episode Volcano of the Cricketers, and some volcano shots also. Nicholas Courtney recorded his 3D visual for the monitor for the episode The Traders. The Doctor, Stephen and Katarina land on a planet unfamiliar to them.
He has a strange sickness. Can you not help him?
I'm doing the very best I can, my child.
Stephen is unwell, and the Doctor leaves Katarina to look after Stephen as he explores the planet. She is stuck in a ship she can't possibly comprehend as she comes from ancient Troy.
But we've got to get through to Earth first or the whole solar system is finished.
Brett, a space security agent, steals the Doctor's TARDIS key.
What is it you want?
The key.
What key?
Give me that key or I'll kill you.
and attempts to take control over the TARDIS. The Doctor discovers a city and comes face to face with an old enemy, the Daleks. As they greet their latest ally, Mavic Chen, guardian of the solar system. And for the Doctor, the nightmare has truly begun. The first episode, The Nightmare Begins, was recorded on Friday the 22nd of October 1965 in Studio 3 at BBC Television Centre. At this time, Doctor Who would rehearse throughout the week and tape Friday nights. The cast and even the director was unhappy with the scripts, which were being rewritten throughout rehearsals.
The old man said this was no ordinary ship, and he was right.
Actor Nicholas Courtney, later known for playing the Brigadier, was cast as Space Security Agent Brett Vian. He was initially considered for the role of King Richard in The Crusade, and Douglas Canfield, the director of the serial, remembered him. Douglas would also cast him as the Brigadier in The Web of Fear.
We welcome you as we welcome all allies of the Daleks.
The first episode was recorded between 8:30pm and 9:45pm. The Varga plants from Mission to the Unknown make an appearance in this episode also, but only as static props. An error in makeup occurred for this episode. William Hartnell's wig lace could be seen on close-ups, and the beard for Kurt Gantry looked different from the pre-filmed inserts. Sonia Markham, who was in charge of this, apologised for the continuity error, but said there wasn't much she could have done about the hair lace. Luckily for her, that episode has been junked, so we have no evidence of this anymore. Katarina, Brett, and Stephen escape the TARDIS before the Daleks arrived and reunite with the Doctor.
If the Daleks are doing something drastic, then we have to stop the Daleks. Now will you shut up, sir?
The Daleks begin to burn down the jungle as they conduct their first Galactic Council meeting.
The seventh meeting is now in session.
Various delegates from the outer galaxies have united to create the Time Destructor, a weapon of mass destruction, which only requires one last element, an M of Terranium, which is provided by Mavic Chen.
I now present you with the core of the Time Destructor, a full M of Terranium.
The TARDIS travellers, alongside Brett, take over Mavic Chen's ship
I'm taking over this spaceship, over there.
as the Doctor steals the Terranium core. Brett, knowing that they must leave soon, decides to leave the Doctor to perish in the hands of the Daleks.
Without him, we can't reach the place of perfection.
We won't, we're going without him.
The second episode, Day of Armageddon, was recorded on Friday the 29th of October 1965 in Studio 3 at BBC Television Centre. In order to simulate the jungle being on fire, the smoke recorded in pre-filming was laid over the footage.
Doctor, it's like a wall of fire.
Loose Cannon, when creating their Daleks Master Plan reconstruction in 2003, reconstructed this episode also. Little did they know, the following January in 2004, this episode would be returned to the archive.
Search for him.
Fans had to wait until November to see the original episode in full, when it was released in the Lost in Time DVD box set alongside the other two surviving episodes.
You're a very brave man.
Rubbish, rubbish, my boy. I'm only doing what has to be done.
The Doctor makes it back to Mavic Chen's ship just in time for liftoff.
I thought you weren't going to make it. Oh, of course I was. You're far too pessimistic.
The Doctor informs the travellers about the Master Plan, and it is eventually decided that they should head to Earth to warn space security about this evil plot.
Yes, you must find someone you can trust, someone in a high enough position that may be able to help.
Unfortunately, the ship begins to break down, and they plunge into the depths of Desperus, a dangerous penal planet.
Crashing for a changing cost.
The travellers must restore the ship to working order before they are attacked by the prisoners, or worse, the Daleks.
On course for planet Desperus. Impact in 0.6.
As they finally escape, thinking that they're free, Katerina is taken hostage by one of the prisoners.
You realize...
The third episode, Devil's Planet, was recorded on Friday the 5th of November 1965 in Studio 3 at BBC Television Centre. Before recording, a photo shoot was held for the press. Oddly, these photos are the only surviving photographs of Katerina in costume, and they were taken on her second to last day.
The Daleks will stop at anything to prevent us.
Instead of reusing the original audio of Mark Corey's message from Mission to the Unknown, it was re-recorded by Dalek voice actor Peter Hawkins. The message was slightly different to the original message also.
Mark Corey, Special Security Service reporting from the Panic Temple.
That is Mark Corey, Special Security Agent, reporting from the Panic Temple.
Barry Newbury designed a full section of the exterior of Mavic Chen's spaceship, also known as a spar. No, not that spar. This spar. In order to keep the costs down, they only designed one ship leg to be planted in the swamp. Newbury said in Doctor Who magazine issue 183,
"Although cost was always a problem, it never damped my enjoyment in designing for Doctor Who and working on set. I remember during the camera rehearsal, I was busy on another set in the studio, and so lost in the delights of creating a swamp with mud, tree roots and so on, that I was unaware I was whistling. Victor Itellis shouted over to me, 'We all know you're happy, Barry, but we are trying to work.'"
Katerina is held hostage in the airlock. In the struggle, she accidentally presses the button to open the outer door.
Rebecca! Katerina! Katerina!
And they are both sucked into space.
She wanted to save our lives, and perhaps the lives of all the other beings of the solar system. Oh, I shall always remember her as one of the daughters of the gods.
Back on Earth, Mavic Chen assigns a security agent to apprehend Brett and the Travellers and return the Terranium core. Her name was Sarah Kingdom.
They're in the main block. I'm going to capture them myself.
The Travellers, now on Earth, meet with a friend of Brett's to inform them about the Daleks' plan. The Doctor realises that his friend is in league with Chen.
What price is Mavic Chen paying you for your treachery?
Sarah threatens Brett to hand over the Terranium.
Sarah, please listen.
Give me the Terranium.
He refuses,
You too.
and she shoots him dead. She then issues orders to hunt down the other Travellers.
They will be shot on sight, but aim for the head.
The fourth episode, The Traders, was recorded on Friday the 12th of November 1965 in Studio 3 at BBC Television Centre. Katerina's death was planned quite early on. Donald Tosh and John Wiles, upon reading the draft scripts for the Mythmakers, found her character difficult for the audience to identify with, and chose to kill her off for shock value. The speech about Katerina's sacrifice was written by Donald Tosh also. In the original script, Nation simply writes,
"I leave this to you, as the speech depends on what you have previously established."
A new companion named Sarah Kingdom, played by Jean Marsh, was written to replace Katerina. William Hartnell was becoming increasingly disruptive. A term was devised, Better Phone the Designer, which was a signal to cool down John Wiles to deal with him. At one point, it got so bad that there was a temporary crew walkout in protest after he upset his dresser. But there isn't just negative stories about Hartnell during this time. Jean Marsh recollects in Doctor Who magazine issue 125 that,
"I think maybe he wasn't well. Certainly he needed a lot of rest. Though he was no bother to work with when it came to learning lines or things like that. The only problem was laughing. And yes, of course, he laughed a lot too."
The Doctor and Stephen, who are attempting to escape Sarah's capture, decides to hide in a large white room. Little do they know, other security agents are doing an experiment with long-distance travel.
Starting dissemination countdown. In 10 seconds.
Sarah finds the Doctor and Stephen, and all three are now exposed to the experiment and are transported across space to the planet Myra.
Tell the Daleks that you trapped the fugitive in the cellular projector and sent them to Myra on purpose.
Marvick Chen lies to the Daleks and tells them that they were transported to Myra on purpose, as it is closer to Kemble.
When I am next to the Daleks, only they stand between me and the highest position in the universe. Then will be the time for me to take complete control.
Stephen tries to convince Sarah of the truth of Chen's plan.
It mustn't be.
I'm afraid it is, my dear.
But Brett had to be killed.
Shut up! Brett Byrne was my brother.
As the Daleks arrive on Myra, the Doctor fights off a Vizian, an invisible creature, but the Daleks prove the greater threat, as the Doctor and friends are trapped.
I'm afraid, my friends, the Daleks have won.
The fifth episode, Counterplot, was recorded on Friday the 19th of November 1965 in Studio 4 at BBC Television Centre. This episode was originally titled There's Something Just Behind You, but was later changed to Counterplot. The original name later inspired an episode of The Baron titled There's Something Close Behind You. By this point, the first episode of the Daleks Master Plan had aired. Cindy Newman even called John Wiles to congratulate him on how much he enjoyed the episode.
Stop them? Yes, and it appears we're trapped.
There was quite a few special effects needed for this story, due to the invisible creatures. To achieve the effect of the Vizian moving Sarah's hair, they used a wire so they could move it whenever they wished. And to make the bushes move, a fine cotton thread was used. The Daleks demand the Doctor hand over the Terranium core.
You mustn't forget that I came here and surrendered of my own free will.
The Doctor and friends take over the Dalek ship and take off.
Report the fugitives boarded the pursuit ship!
The Daleks on Kemble quickly discover this news and take control of the ship via a magnetized beam.
They may believe that they have successfully escaped from us, but we, the Daleks, are still in command!
Knowing they can't control the ship, they must devise a plan to make a fake Terranium core to hand over. Now on Kemble,
The young man will give you the Terranium when the girl and I are safely inside my ship, the TARDIS.
Very well!
Stephen hands Chen the Terranium core.
This is it! The core of the time destructor!
Exterminate him!
And they escape in the Doctor's ship. But the story is far from being all over. The sixth episode, Coronas of the Sun, was recorded on Friday the 26th of November 1965 in Studio 4 at BBC Television Centre. When Loose Cannon originally made the reconstruction for the Daleks Master Plan, there was no images of the Vizians, and a CGI rendition was made based on guesstimation and fan memory by CG artist Stuart Palmer. Since then, 2 photos have been recovered of the Vizians so we can finally get a proper glimpse of these invisible creatures. This episode also features my favourite Dalek line of all time.
You make your incompetence sound like an achievement!
The TARDIS lands outside a police station in 1965 and the scanner is broken. As the Doctor attempts to fix it, he is taken in for questioning by the police inspector.
You mean you're not English?
No, gracious no.
Scottish?
No.
All right, what are you then?
Well, I suppose you might say that I am a citizen of the universe. And a gentleman to boot.
Stephen steals a police outfit in order to rescue the Doctor, and they quickly escape. They take off again and land in 1920s Hollywood, in the middle of a film set. All 3 travellers are mistaken for various actors, and hijinks ensue.
What is it?
I don't know, but a strange man kept telling me to take my clothes off.
Eventually, they make their way back to the TARDIS, where the Doctor turns to the screen and says,
Incidentally, Happy Christmas to all of you at home.
The 7th episode, The Feast of Stephen, was recorded on Friday the 3rd of December 1965 in Studio 3 at BBC Television Centre. When planning the serial, the team were aware that an episode would be broadcast over Christmas and felt as if the original story was too complex and dark to be told over the festive season. Therefore, a comedy episode was to be written that had absolutely nothing to do with the overall story. Therefore, if the audience missed this week, it wouldn't matter. Originally, Douglas Camfield asked if 4 members from the television show Z-Cars would like to play the police officers in this story. The producer of Z-Cars refused the crossover and felt it undermined the seriousness of his program. Also, the cast were busy filming their show. Speaking of casting, the character Man in a Macintosh, played by Reg Pritchard, originally played the role of Ben Dahir in The Crusade, and a 4th wall breaking line was added to highlight that.
Haven't I seen your face before somewhere? Where? Yes, of course, I remember now. Yes, the marketplace at Jaffa.
The final line, where the Doctor faces to the camera and wishes the audience a happy Christmas, has been in hot dispute for years. Donald Tosh and John Wiles both claim it was an improvised line by Hartnell, but when you check the camera script, it's clearly written. It was a late addition to the camera script, but clearly intended to occur by the director, due to it having planned camera moves. The Daleks have discovered that the Terranium core that Stephen handed over was a fake.
The core is worthless! No, it can't be! It came from Uranus! I know it did!
The Daleks begin their pursuit of the Doctor's TARDIS, and they aren't the only ones to be following the TARDIS. As the Doctor lands on the planet Tygus, they encounter a familiar face, the meddling monk. The monk is inciting his revenge on the Doctor by destroying the Doctor's TARDIS keyhole, making it impossible for the Doctor to enter his ship.
Doctor, you remember you left me in 1066. Now I've marooned you on the planet Tygus Rock!
The Doctor uses his ring to fix the lock and escapes once again.
How did you break that lock?
Oh, that's all very simple, dear boy. You see, the sun in that particular galaxy has very unusual powers. I merely reflected its powers through that ring.
The TARDIS lands in Trafalgar Square as the new year is rung in.
What do you think they're celebrating?
Well, as far as I can remember, I've seen them behave in a fashion like that on a former occasion.
What was that?
The relief of Mafeking.
The 8th episode, Volcano, was recorded on Friday the 10th of December 1965 in Studio 3 at BBC Television Centre. Peter Butterworth, who previously played the meddling monk in The Time Meddler, returned to Doctor Who for rehearsals on Monday 6th. Yet it wasn't all happy reunions. Hartnell was becoming increasingly irritated at the scripts, especially highlighting the moment where the Doctor uses his ring to fix the jammed lock.
The combined forces of that sun, together with the stone in that ring, was sufficient enough to correct the monk's interference.
He believed it didn't make continuity sense within the series. Truly, the first argument about canon in Doctor Who. I can almost picture William Hartnell making a 50-minute YouTube video complaining about it. Side note, that was just a joke. Please make any content you wish to make. The Daleks' time machine was humorously referred to as a DARDIS in the stage directions. Production assistant Victor Vitellis suggested using boiling porridge as a substitute for lava in the model shots.
What about the subject? That subject! Exterminate him!
To show the grim fate of Trantis after being exposed to the Time Destructor, a decomposing corpse prop was used. Since this episode is missing, it is unsure what this looked like. The TARDIS lands in ancient Egypt at the Great Pyramid, and the monk is hot on their trail. Stephen discovers that the Daleks have also found them.
Daleks?
I knew we should have tried to get back to Kemble.
It's a bit late for that now. We've got to warn the Doctor.
When they are captured by the Pyramid guards.
Seize them!
The monk attempts to form an alliance with Marvick Chen, who has also arrived.
The Doctor and his friends have in their possession a full M of terranium. You will recover this and return it to us within 1 Earth hour. And I need hardly remind you that the Daleks will reward failure on your part with elimination.
Elimination. Thank you.
The Doctor sabotages the monk's TARDIS, changing it into a police box to look like the Doctor's TARDIS. Stephen and Sarah, now escaping from the guards, rushes back to the TARDIS, where they notice a mummified hand emerge from the sarcophagus. The 9th episode, Golden Death, was recorded on Friday the 17th of December 1965 in Studio 3 at BBC Television Centre. Episode 9 was originally titled Land of the Pharaohs, but by the time of rehearsals, the name was changed to Golden Death.
Did we sustain damage? No, it was only inhabitants of this time and planet, unimportant. Exterminate them on sight.
To beef up the number of Daleks, the Black Dalek Supreme was painted silver. The names of the Egyptian guards were loosely based on real Egyptian names. The mummified hand is actually the hand of the monk. The Doctor had wrapped him up and hid him in there. Stephen and Sarah attempted to find the Doctor so they could finally escape, but they aren't the only ones trying to find the Doctor. Marvick Chen has captured Sarah and Stephen.
No! Prepare to exterminate them.
Exterminate? What, when I fulfill my part of the bargain?
Give me the terranium core!
I haven't actually got the core, but I've brought you hostages. Hostages?
The Doctor has no choice but to hand it over. The Doctor takes the monk's directional unit and installs it into his own TARDIS. Either the unit will take him back to Kemble or destroy the central column. The monk, without his directional unit, is taken to a planet of ice, with no way of correctly navigating his ship. Back on the Doctor's TARDIS, Stephen activates the directional unit to a mighty explosion. The 10th episode, Escape Switch, was recorded on Friday the 31st of December 1965 in Studio 3 at BBC Television Centre. Escape Switch was the 100th episode of Doctor Who, and to mark the occasion, a photographer came in to photograph Bill getting his wig fitted. Clayton Hickman highlighted on Twitter that you can even see Hartnell's script for next week's episode, The Abandoned Planet, on the dressing table. These photographs were to be released on the week that the 100th episode aired, on the 15th of January. Marvick Chen has returned to Kemble with the real terranium core, and is ready to conquer the universe.
Why is Marvick Chen speaking for the Dalek Supreme?
The other delegates dislikes Chen's belief that he is superior, and Chen retaliates by killing the delegate Giron.
This council now is under my power. I will give the order. You will obey them.
The TARDIS has arrived on Kemble with the monk's directional unit burnt out. The three travellers make their way through the jungle only to lose the Doctor. Stephen and Sarah locate the other delegates, who have now decided that they will work against the Daleks.
The Daleks must be destroyed! All galaxies are in danger!
They are released in order to warn the outer galaxies. Sarah and Stephen notice a Dalek making its way down a cave tunnel when a figure approaches.
I'm certain the Daleks will be delighted to see you.
The 11th episode, The Abandoned Planet, was recorded on Friday the 7th of January 1966 in Studio 3 at BBC Television Centre. Episode 11 was originally titled Return to Varga. Initially, the planet Kemble was named Varga, a name which was later given to the deadly Varga plant in Mission to the Unknown. Now with the new year rung in, the weight of this mammoth serial started to take its toll. Donald Tosh and John Wiles both handed in their resignation and were ready to leave Doctor Who in the dust. For some unknown reason, the Doctor was essentially written out of the majority of the episode. There is no record of him being sick, especially since he made it to the recording of the film inserts for the massacre earlier that week, and also appeared to film his short scenes on the day. Stephen and Sarah took over the majority of the Doctor's lines. Now that the Daleks have got the Terranium core, Marvick Chen's usefulness has expired. They did. The Doctor activates the Time Destructor.
No, you cannot fire, can you? You dare not! If it were, yes, you would kill us. But you would totally destroy your equipment.
As they escape back to the TARDIS, the planet around them begins to age and turn into dust. Stephen makes it back to the ship in enough time to not be affected, but the Doctor and Sarah aren't so lucky. Sarah is nothing but dust. Stephen manages to reverse the effects of the Time Destructor and brings the Doctor into the TARDIS.
Don't touch me! I'll help you! You get back to the ship! God, fire!
The Daleks de-age and become embryos, and then into nothing. The Daleks are defeated, but at what cost?
Let's go, Doctor. I've seen enough of this.
Well, my boy, we finally rid this planet of Daleks.
Brent! Katerina!
Sarah. What a waste. What a terrible waste.
The 12th and final episode, Destruction of Time, was recorded on Friday the 14th of January 1966 in Studio 3 at BBC Television Centre. This episode went through a few different names, starting with The Mutation of Time, which eventually became the name of the second part of the novelisation, and A Switch in Time, before eventually falling on Destruction of Time. When the final script did arrive, a few chunks of dialogue for the Doctor were rewritten for Stephen. Originally, the Doctor slowly made his way to the Time Destructor whilst Chen went on his mad ramblings. In the final version, the Doctor seems to have appeared out of nowhere. For the final episode, Raymond Cusick took over as designer in order to give Barry Newbury more time to prepare for the upcoming serial, The Ark. They both shared the role of designer throughout the serial. Raymond is most well known for inventing the design of the Daleks. The recording of the episode overran due to the roller capture machine which kept sticking when trying to display the end credits. When it started to work again, a stagehand got into shot, which ended with Douglas Camfield going off at them. The serial reached its peak audience figures at 10.3 million for episode 3, Devil's Planet, and saw its lowest at 7.9 million for episode 7, The Feast of Stephen. This dip wasn't unusual, for it was common at the time for audience figures to fall by roughly 65% on Christmas Day. Mary Whitehouse, a commentator on the negative impacts of Doctor Who, referred to this serial saying,
"Well, we've got the Daleks in Doctor Who, a children's show, mind you, chanting kill, kill, kill. One day, a youngster is going to go out and do just that."
In response, Harlow counsellor Miss Avril Fox said,
TV has no effect on kids. They act out more aggression in their own little fantasies than the most imaginative of Doctor Who's screenwriters could ever dream up.
Mrs. P. Clark also had complaints about the programme, claiming the death of Katerina was too violent for children.
It shocked me that this programme, which has become so popular with viewers of all ages, should have deteriorated into the horror spectacle I saw on Saturday.
Sadly, 9 out of 12 episodes do not exist in the BBC's archive due to routine junking. Thankfully, we have episodes 2, 5 and 10 in the archive. Let's discuss what's left of the Daleks Master Plan. Episodes 5 and 10 were found in the basement of a Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints in July 1983. Episode 2 was returned in January 2004 by a former BBC engineer, Francis Watson. When they offered it for overseas sale, The Feast of Stephen was not included due to its festive nature. no one but Australia was interested in the serial. It was inspected by the censors, and they considered a hefty amount of cuts to the serial to make it less graphic. Yet, after consideration, it was decided that editing around these cuts would be too difficult, and the purchase of the serial was cancelled. Alongside these surviving episodes, the original broadcast was recorded on audio by fans. Higher quality recordings were recently found which were titled the Randolph Tapes, and hopefully this means we will get an even better audio quality in a future release. A 58-second film trim from episode 4, The Traitors, survives due to being included on an episode of Blue Peter in November 1973. The episode was never returned to the BBC library, so its fate is unknown. An extract from episode 3, Devil's Planet, exists from an episode of Blue Peter also. 35mm film sequences from episodes 1 and 2 exist also. Unfortunately, no telesnaps for the Daleks Master Plan exist. This is because they were never commissioned. Although there are 20 off-screen photographs for the Feast of Stephen, these were not completed by John Cura. You can hear this story via an audio release narrated by Peter Purvis, and it is also available on vinyl. The story was novelised in 2 parts by John Peel in 1989. As of the making of this video, no official animation has been announced. If you'd like to know more about missing episodes, watch my documentary series on them here. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Josh Nez YouTube channel.